This is SIG P365 SAS versus Kimber Micro 9 Nightfall, a comparison. This video was filmed at the beautiful Banner Range, and this morning quite many shooters were out taking advantage of the weather before it got uncomfortably hot and humid out. As a result, there's quite a bit of background noise. Let's hit the range. Now looking at our first targets, for the Kimber one, standing at the line after my first magazine where I could not see those two double hits, I thought that one was worse than it really was in reviewing the footage. And while it's not a spectacular group, for me I call it certainly good enough for a micro compact single stack 1911 or style 9mm pistol. Now for the SIG P365 SAS, we see what I'm going to call a very good group for me at 10 yards with the bullseye sight, though we did have ideal conditions for that sight. You'll notice at times for both firearms where I will slightly move forward or back or lean forward or back or whatever, where I'm trying to get that sun to hit the fiber optics on those night sights that we have today. And there were times where they were both fantastic in that regard. If I could get them in that little sliver of daylight that we had shining through the overhead partition. Now right out the gate, I will say that yes, it would be a more apples to apples comparison if we had like a SIG P938 or a Kimber Mako instead of one or the other of what we have represented today. But it is what it is. This is what the crew has, and none of those two are very high on our list of guns to buy up next. So this is what we have today. Let's review some numbers for those who haven't seen our previous videos that contain these firearms. The SIG P365 SAS, or SIG Anti-Snag, is 5.8 inches long, 4.3 inches high, 1 inch wide, and weighs in at 17.8 ounces. The Kimber Micro 9 Nightfall is 6.1 inches long, 4.07 inches high, 1.08 inches wide, and weighs in at 15.6 ounces. Now while both pistols have very similar dimensions and weight, there are some very significant differences between these firearms and how they operate and the features they have, which let's discuss some of those now. The Kimber Micro 9 Nightfall is a micro compact single stack 9mm pistol that is single action only, hammer fired, and is 1911 styled. It comes from the factory with the Hogue grip. The Nightfall version of the Micro 9 also came with some Ameriglow night sights, which we'll come back to in a moment. Those are the main differences between the Nightfall version of the Micro 9 and the standard version of the Micro 9. Like all versions of the Micro 9, it has the low profile thumb safety, slide release, and magazine release. In some of these pictures, you'll probably notice that we have touched up the finish. We have the general wear and tear marks that a used gun would have at this point. One area where I will commend this Micro 9 is, of all the Kimbers that we have access to, it has been by far the most reliable of the lot of them, and it's not close. The SIG P365 SAS is a 9mm micro compact double stack pistol that is striker fired. The one that we happen to be shooting today has no safety. Now there are versions of the P365 that you can get with a manual thumb safety. This is not one of those. The SIG anti-snag or SAS versions of the P365 have a low profile magazine release and what I'm going to call a no profile slide release and takedown lever. You do need a tool to use the takedown lever. You cannot do that by hand or with your, say, thumbnail or whatever. And the slide release, you can release that with, say, your thumbnail, but you really can't use it as, say, a slide release as on the other 365 models. Now you'll notice I have put the Hogue grip sleeve on my P365 SAS. That's an aftermarket part. It did not come that way. The more mentionable part of this picture is you'll notice the SAS models do not have a front sight. The rear sight on these is the MiPro bullseye sight. Here you can see a top-down view of that sight. You can see it takes up quite a bit of footprint on the top of that slide, which they've milled out the area for that. And no, you cannot easily just replace that with, say, a micro red dot sight, unfortunately. Now in daylight conditions, you can see there is a large window area on that to allow light to hit the fiber optics and to illuminate that sight in a daylight conditions, which let me show you how that sight looks. Now here's a view of how that bullseye sight looks. The idea is you look at it like a bullseye, you put the bullseye over what you want to hit. Fairly straightforward, though. If you're not used to it, it does take quite a bit of practice to get used to it. And I think at 10 yards and in, at least on the targets I shoot at, it can be very effective. On a silhouette target, a full-size silhouette, I think you can do further, but there is a distance where the firearm is going to obscure your entire target and you're really going to lose the pinpoint accuracy that you need to do, like, say, long distance precision shooting, which this firearm isn't designed for, obviously. Now before we talk about some more details, how about a little more range time? With the similar dimensions on these firearms, and one of the major differences between them being the micro compact single stack versus micro compact double stack nature and the capacity that affords, let's compare the grips and the grip size on these firearms. Now while the aftermarket Hogue grip sleeve does add a slight bit more to the body we'll say, of the grip on the SIG P365 SAS. Overall, I'm going to say they are extremely similar in their grip size. Where the difference becomes apparent is from a bottom-down view, or a bottom-up view. As you can see on the Kimber, we have a lot of dead space there where it's just rubber compared to magazine space on the SIG. Here's a slightly different angle of that where you can really see the Hogue grip on my SIG adds almost nothing to the width, whereas on the Kimber that is probably a third of the width of the firearm. Now for both firearms we do see that Hogue grip adds the knuckle rib and to the depth of the grip, but again on the Kimber we see that the Hogue grip adds about a third to the width, and it's very noticeable when compared to a non-Hogue grip micro Kimber. Though even still on the non-Hogue model of the Kimber Micro, we see the grip still adds quite a bit to the width of those single stack micro models. With manufacturer-made 15-round magazines, the micro compact double stack has a big capacity advantage over a micro compact single stack. Comparing the size of the 10 versus the 7-round magazine, we see in height they are very similar in height. However, on width, we see that the 10-round magazine, while it is wider, it's not so much wider that it's going to take up more space in your pocket or your pocket holster, in my opinion, to justify the difference in size in that regard. Moving to the 15-round magazine, we see it is both significantly longer and wider than the 7-round magazine, but it's also more than twice the capacity. That's significant. Now, all hope is not lost on the Nightfall. One area where it does have a significant advantage, in my opinion, is on the sights. It does come with a very nice set of AmeriGlow day-night sights. They do glow in the dark with the tritium. They do have nice big areas for the fiber optics to get lit up by daylight or other light sources. As you can see, they're very easy to see on the rear and the front sights. And we've even done some very long-range shots with them. The 50 or 65 range shot on a gong that you see in one of our intro videos was done using this Kimber Micro Nightfall and those same sights you see here. Now before we talk a little more, how about a little more range time? Comparing our targets, for the Kimber target, we have what I'm going to call an okay target. We put, a few hits on the target. It's an okay group. What I'm going to call acceptable for me, especially considering I haven't shot this gun in quite a while. Moving to the SIG target, I'm hesitant to say that's a better grouping. One thing that we can definitely say about it is that by virtue of the capacity advantage, we have done more damage to the target, and that's hard to argue with. Could we have done different with the standard sights instead of the bullseye sight? At that distance, for me, probably not. Now, one area we have not commented on up until now is the recoil or felt recoil of these firearms. In my not an expert opinion, be it single stack or double stack, as far as a micro compact 9mm pistol goes, uncomfortable recoil is part of the game, and really the only way, in my not an expert opinion, to overcome that is with regular practice and to gain, and maintain comfort with those firearms. Now, it's easy to say after one range trip that the Nightfall or the SIG SAS is an uncomfortable firearm to shoot and hard to shoot, and it's terrible to practice with or whatever. But with regular practice, I think either one can be guns that, while they won't be pleasant to shoot, they can be guns that are real manageable to shoot and to maintain a level of proficiency and gain proficiency from there. Both firearms, I think, are certainly good enough for their intended use as concealed carry, personal protection, home defense style firearms. I find both to be both very reliable and very accurate, which I think is important not only in any firearm, but in your personal protection, home defense, concealed carry firearm. And while they don't have the most pleasant recoil, like say my 365, 380, or Glock 42, or something else in 380 or 22, they're far from what I would call the unmanageable spectrum for a concealed carry, home defense, personal protection type firearm. With regular practice, they are very manageable and very capable firearms, and I think both are very good choices. Well, I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a good day.